I didn't expect anything serious when I met her. It was one of those situations where you just start talking, and somehow it keeps going longer than it should. She wasn't trying too hard, didn't feel rehearsed or fake. Just easy. The kind of person you don't get tired of after an hour. We talked about random things at first, nothing deep, but it didn't feel shallow either. And what stood out almost immediately was how quickly she seemed to understand me. Not in a dramatic way, just small things. The way I phrase stuff, the kind of jokes I make, the way I react to things. It felt natural, like we were already on the same wavelength without needing time to get there. At the time, I thought that was rare. Like I just got lucky meeting someone who gets it right away. And I liked how calm she was. No games, no weird signals, no trying to create distance or act mysterious. If anything, she felt present, like she was actually there with me, not somewhere else in her head. But looking back, there was something slightly off even then. Nothing obvious, nothing I could point to. Just this quiet feeling that she wasn't discovering me the way people usually do at the beginning. It was more like she was recognizing things. Like certain parts of me didn't surprise her at all. And I remember thinking, for a split second, how does she already know that? But I didn't hold on to that thought. Because when something feels good, you don't question it. You let it be what it is. And that's exactly what I did. The more we talked, the faster everything moved into that comfortable space people usually take weeks to reach. We didn't have that awkward stage where you're careful with words or trying to read between the lines. It was just smooth. We'd text without overthinking, meet up without planning it too much, and somehow it all just worked. She paid attention to details in a way that felt almost unreal. Not just remembering things I said, but responding to them before I even fully explained. Like she already knew where I was going with the story. At first, it felt good. It felt like connection. Like finally meeting someone who doesn't need everything spelled out. But then there were small moments that didn't sit quite right. Not enough to bother me, just enough to notice. Like when I'd start saying something, and she'd smile in this knowing way, like she had already heard it before. Or when I'd react to something, and she'd nod, not surprised, just expecting it. I remember joking once, "You're reading me too easily," and she laughed, but there was something behind it. Not pride, not awkwardness, just this quiet certainty. And I brushed it off, because everything else felt so easy, so natural, that it didn't make sense to question it. When things fall into place that quickly, you don't stop to ask why. You just assume it's right. The first time it happened, it didn't even register as something serious. We were just talking, nothing important, and she suddenly said, "Remember that place you showed me? The one with the terrace?" I paused for a second, trying to catch up, because I hadn't shown her any place like that. Not yet. I thought maybe she meant something else, or maybe I forgot. So I just kind of laughed and said, "I think you've got the wrong guy," trying to keep it light. She looked at me for a moment, not confused, not embarrassed, just slightly thrown off, like something didn't line up the way she expected. Then she quickly brushed it off, smiled, and said something like, "Yeah, maybe I mixed it up," and moved on like nothing happened. And that should have been it. People mix things up all the time. It wasn't a big deal. But the way she said it stayed with me. It didn't feel like she was guessing. It felt like she was remembering something real. Something that, for her, had already happened. I didn't push it, didn't ask questions, didn't make it weird. Because everything else still felt normal. Good, even. But later that night, I caught myself thinking about it again. Not the words, but the certainty behind them. And that was the first moment I felt it. Not confusion, not concern. Just a small, quiet question forming in the back of my head. How can you remember something that never happened? I didn't bring it up again. It felt too small to turn into something bigger, and honestly, I didn't want to ruin the mood over something that could have just been a simple mix-up. People confuse details all the time, especially early on. So I let it go. We kept seeing each other, kept talking, and everything still felt just as easy as before. If anything, that moment got buried under all the normal, good parts. But a few days later, it happened again. This time it wasn't just a random comment. We were talking about plans for the weekend, and she said something like, "We could go back to that park. It was really nice last time." I stopped again, because we hadn't been to any park together. Not even once. And the way she said it, it wasn't a suggestion. It was a continuation. Like she was picking up from a memory we shared. I looked at her a little more seriously this time and said, "We've never been to a park together." And for a second, she just stared at me. Not confused. Not defensive. Just quiet. like something inside her was trying to adjust. Then she blinked, smiled a little, and said, "Right. I don't know why I thought that." But it didn't sound convincing. Not to me, and I don't think to her either. And that's when that small question from before came back, a little louder this time. Because once is nothing. But twice? Twice starts to feel like a pattern. After that, I started noticing things I probably would have ignored before. Not big, obvious stuff, just small details that didn't quite fit. The way she reacted to things before they even happened, like she was already a step ahead in the moment. The way she'd sometimes pause when I said something, not because she didn't understand, but like she was comparing it to something else in her head. And then there were the conversations. She'd bring up topics like we'd already talked about them before, referencing things we hadn't actually discussed yet. At first I'd try to go along with it, thinking maybe I just forgot, maybe it was something minor. But it kept happening. Not constantly, not enough to make it obvious, but enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. And the strangest part was how natural it felt for her. She wasn't confused. She wasn't second-guessing herself. She spoke with this quiet certainty, like everything she was saying had already happened exactly the way she remembered it. One night, we were sitting together, just talking like usual, and she said something about how I always go quiet when I'm upset. I looked at her and asked, "What do you mean always?" Because I hadn't even shown that side of myself yet. Not really. And she just shrugged slightly, like it was obvious, like she'd seen it before. That's when it stopped feeling like coincidence. Because it wasn't just about mixed up details anymore. It was about patterns, reactions, versions of me that I hadn't even shown her yet. And somehow, she already knew them. At that point, it stopped being something I could ignore. It wasn't just a couple of strange comments anymore. It was consistent, quiet, subtle, but consistent. And the more I paid attention, the more it felt like I was catching up to something instead of experiencing it for the first time. She'd look at me in certain moments like she already knew how I was about to react. Not guessing, knowing. Sometimes she'd even say things before I did, finish my thoughts in a way that wasn't just lucky timing. It felt practiced, like she'd already heard these conversations somewhere else. One evening it got harder to brush off. I got a little irritated about something small, nothing serious, just one of those moments where you go quiet for a bit. I didn't explain it, didn't make it obvious. But she immediately softened, leaned closer, and said, "You do this when something bothers you. You just shut down for a bit." The way she said it wasn't like she was learning me. It was like she was recalling me. And I remember just looking at her, trying to understand how she could be so sure about something I hadn't even fully shown her yet. That's when the discomfort really settled in. Because it no longer felt like connection. It felt like repetition. Like I wasn't the first version of this person she had seen. And I didn't know where that version came from. That night, I couldn't just ignore it anymore. It stayed in my head long after she left, replaying in small pieces. Not just what she said, but how she said it. That certainty. Like she wasn't figuring me out. She was remembering me. And the more I thought about it, the more everything started connecting in a way I didn't like. All those moments that felt like, wow, she really gets me, suddenly felt different. Like maybe she wasn't getting me in real time. Maybe she was matching me to something she already knew. The next time we met, I paid attention in a different way. I watched how she reacted, how she spoke, what she assumed. And it kept happening. Not constantly, not in a way you could easily point out, but enough. Like when I'd say something new, and she'd nod like it confirmed something instead of surprising her. Or when she'd respond to things I hadn't fully explained yet, like she was filling in the blanks from somewhere else. It didn't feel random anymore. It felt like a pattern I wasn't part of. And that's when I realized I couldn't keep pretending it was nothing. Because once you start noticing something like that, it doesn't fade. It gets louder, clearer, and eventually, you have to ask the question you've been avoiding. Not because you want to, but because not asking starts to feel worse. The next time we were together, I didn't wait for it to happen again. I already knew it would. And when you know something is coming, you stop reacting to it. You start watching for it. We were just talking like usual, nothing serious. And she said something about how I hate crowded places on weekends because it stresses me out after a long week. I went quiet for a second, because that wasn't something I had ever told her. Not directly. It was true, but it wasn't something she should have known that clearly. I looked at her and asked, calmly this time, "How do you know that?" She paused. Not long, just enough to feel it. And then she gave a simple answer, something like, "You just seem like that kind of person." But it didn't match the way she said it before. Before, it wasn't a guess. It was a statement. And she knew that too. I didn't let it go this time. I asked her directly, "Are you mixing me up with someone?" And the moment I said it, something shifted. She didn't get defensive. She didn't laugh it off. She just looked at me in a way I hadn't seen before. Not confused. Not guilty. Just caught somewhere between two thoughts. And for the first time since I met her, she didn't seem sure of what to say. That silence felt different from all the others. It wasn't empty. It was full of something she hadn't told me yet. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was something real. Something she had been carrying before I ever showed up. She didn't answer right away. Just looked at me for a few seconds, like she was deciding how much to say and how far to go with it. And then she exhaled, not dramatically, just tired, like she had been holding something in for a while. "I'm not mixing you up," she said quietly. And that didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made it worse. Because that meant everything I'd been noticing wasn't random. It was intentional, even if she didn't fully realize it herself. I asked her again, more directly this time. "Then what is it?" She hesitated, then finally said it. Not in one clean explanation, but in pieces. She told me about her last relationship. How it lasted a long time. How it started almost exactly the same way ours did. Same kind of conversations, same pace, same feeling of everything just clicking too easily. And as she talked, I could see it, not just hear it. The way she described him, the situations, the patterns, they were lining up with me in ways that didn't feel like coincidence anymore. "You react the same way he did," she said at one point, almost like she was realizing it out loud. "You say things the same way sometimes." And that's when everything shifted. Because it wasn't that she knew me. It was that she had known someone like me. Someone she had already been through all of this with. And without meaning to, without even noticing it at first, she had started placing me into that same space. I wasn't just me to her. I was overlapping with someone from her past. And suddenly, all those moments made sense. The certainty, the memories, that never happened. They didn't come from me. They came from something she hadn't let go of yet. I didn't interrupt her. I just listened, letting everything settle in a way that felt heavier with each word. Because once she said it out loud, there was no way to unsee it anymore. All those moments that felt strange suddenly had a clear shape. It wasn't about her being mysterious or overly intuitive. It was about overlap. She wasn't seeing me fully as I was. She was seeing parts of someone else in me and filling in the rest from memory. I asked her quietly, "Do you realize you've been doing that?" Not accusing, just trying to understand if she saw it the same way now. She nodded, slowly, like it was hitting her too in real time. And that was the part that made it harder. It wasn't intentional. She didn't plan it, didn't try to replace anything. It just happened. Because whatever she had before, it hadn't fully ended inside her. And I could feel this strange mix of emotions building up. Not anger, not exactly. More like distance. Because it's one thing when someone doesn't understand you. But it's different when they think they already do, based on someone you're not. I realized then that I had been stepping into a space that was already shaped by someone else. Every reaction, every assumption, every "you're like this," it wasn't really about me. It was about a version of someone she hadn't let go of. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that no matter how well things seemed to work between us, I wasn't being seen for who I actually was. I was being compared, quietly, constantly, to someone I had never met. And that's not something you can build anything real on. I didn't make a big decision in that moment. I didn't stand up and end things or turn it into some dramatic conversation. I just sat with it, because sometimes the quiet realizations hit harder than any argument. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that nothing between us was actually starting from zero. I wasn't building something new with her. I was stepping into something that had already existed, just with a different face. And no matter how natural it felt at first, that kind of beginning isn't really a beginning at all. It's a continuation of something unfinished. Over the next few days, I noticed it even more. The way she'd catch herself mid-sentence. The way she'd pause before reacting, like she was trying to separate what was me and what wasn't. And I could see that she didn't mean any harm. That made it harder, not easier. Because you can't fix something like that just by talking it through. It's not about effort. It's about what's already there. So I stepped back. Slowly, without drama. Less time together, fewer conversations, more space. And she understood, even if we didn't fully say it out loud. Because deep down, we both knew what the problem was. It wasn't that we didn't get along. It wasn't that something went wrong between us. It was that I wasn't the only person in the relationship. There was a version of someone else there too. And I couldn't compete with a memory. You can't build something real when you're constantly being compared to something that already happened. And that's what stayed with me the most. Sometimes it's not about being wrong for each other. Sometimes it's about meeting someone at the wrong time, when they're still living in a story they haven't finished yet.